Hey guys, so when I was out in San Francisco, I was fortunate enough to have an interview with Yoshi-P. Unfortunately, my interview was at the very end of the day, so a lot of the hard-hitting questions had already been brought up. I went through and spoke to various people who had already had their interviews and got a general idea of what people had been asking, and ultimately decided that maybe I'd take a little bit of a different approach to my interview and dig up some older questions that had been left unresolved or get answers to things that people have been asking for a while. First up, I decided that I would tackle the subject of Blitzball because we haven't heard anything about it in a while. And of course, Yoshi-P initially covered his face and sank down in his chair a little bit before finally giving me an answer. And he told me that Blitzball is just a really difficult thing to implement into an MMORPG because you have some people on the side of the fence that want something that's a little more interactive that they can actually play. You have others that want something that's more akin to the actual Blitzball from Final Fantasy X, and the development team is just at a complete standstill and they don't really know which way to go, so they haven't made much progress with it. However, he did say that they have been picking away at some gold saucer stuff, and maybe we could expect snowboarding at some point in the near future. Maybe, he said, maybe. So my next question was about tank stances, because we had just learned that they had been fundamentally changed from the ground up, and I was really curious about the design team's choice in removing enmity as something that players had to manage. And though my question initially seemed to get lost in translation, because Yoshi-P responded, yeah, if you're in tank stance, you have aggro. And he kind of looked at me like, is that what you meant? That isn't what you meant, is it? And thankfully I had a chance to re-clarify, and essentially the idea was that they saw the player base had been more or less torn into like two separate groups, right? Where you have one group where, oh, you're in tank stance, what are you doing? You're lowering your DPS. Or you have people who are like, what are you doing not in tank stance? You're a tank, you're supposed to be in tank stance. And it caused a lot of friction and issues, and it absolutely did. And they decided that it just wasn't really worth it to have that, not to mention the fact that for people that just focused on DPSing, they didn't use half their toolkit, such as enmity generating, combos and things like that. It just kind of made a lot of things redundant. And they wanted to make tanks more active by expanding their toolkits and making it so you use everything and you don't have all these pointless, worthless skills that just rarely ever see the light of day. And ultimately, I think it was a fantastic choice. I'm really happy they went with that, and I'm really looking forward to see how tanking pans out in Shadowbringers. Next up, I got an answer to a question that I know a lot of us have been waiting literally years to get because we never had any closure. I decided to bring up PSO2 and the crossover we never got. And I got an answer and some insight into how they choose crossovers in the first place. So first up, we will not be getting a PSO2 crossover likely ever. And the reason for this is pretty fair, pretty concrete. So PSO2 is a Japan-only game. You can play it from overseas, but the game is only released in Japan. Because of this, they decided they didn't want to do a crossover in 14, simply because Final Fantasy XIV is a worldwide title, and they didn't want to invest in this crossover that only a small portion of the player base would have any connection to. Taking it a step further, he elaborated a little bit about how they chose Yokai Watch, for example, or Monster Hunter, and the reason for those was because at the time, both of those titles were expanding to a worldwide audience. And so moving forward, I think it's fair to assume that any sort of crossovers we get will be from titles that do have worldwide releases and aren't localized only to Japan. So there we go, no PSO2 crossover ever. I'm big sad about that, but hey, we finally got an answer after all these years. Next up, I thought I would throw healers a bone because this is something I've also heard around for quite some time now. And though I'm not a healer myself, I appreciate everything you guys do. So we have tank mounts, right? tanks get mounts, and tanks are a highly sought after job. We need more tanks, but healers are definitely in a similar boat, where incentivizing people to play healers would definitely be great. It's certainly not as significant as our need for tanks, but I mean, healers do a tough job. So I brought up healer mounts, and the answer I got was very simple. Maybe, but if we did, then everybody else would want mounts, and that would be a problem. So maybe, he clarified maybe like 5 times, but probably not maybe. He didn't want to say just flat out no, but it was basically no. Sorry, healers, I tried. And of course, since this was a shared interview and we had limited time, I decided to make my last question one that had been weighing on my mind almost all day. Having played Gunbreaker, I immediately took note of the fact that its tank invuln, Super Bolide, seemed a little underwhelming, and I decided to bring this up to Yoshi-P. I compared it to Hallowed Ground, and I got an answer that I think some of you might find a little shocking, others maybe not so much. But essentially I said that Super Bolide just kind of seemed like an inferior Hallowed Ground with an HP penalty. Not only does Hallowed Ground last 2 seconds longer, but it has the same cooldown and no HP penalty. And the first thing that comes out of his mouth is, Super Bolide is not weak. Maybe Hallowed Ground is OP? And he further clarified that maybe Hallowed Ground's a little overpowered, but if they nerfed it, people would be upset because it's been the way it's been for so long, so they're kind of just in a really weird spot. But the fact of the matter is, he admitted that maybe Hallowed Ground is a little overpowered. Maybe it is. And I think that they should probably do something about it at some point, because Super Bolide's a little weak. But that's about it. I got some answers that, you know, I was happy with, especially the PSO2 one, because I know that's been on my mind for literally years, and quite a few people that I know have also been hoping to get an answer to that. So that'll about do it for this video, though. I'm sorry if my questions were disappointing, but I enjoyed it. The interview was fun. I really wish I would have recorded the audio. I keep forgetting I have a phone now that can actually do things, so I could have recorded it, but I didn't. Hindsight's 2020. Anyways, thank you so much for listening, guys. Thank you so much. I mean, all these videos, I could say it a million times. Thank you so much for everything. Thank you for making this possible. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. And I'll see you in the next video. So until then, you guys take care. Have fun. If you have any questions, please feel free to drop them below. I'm leaving that in because I've been editing for so many hours. I can't do it anymore. All right. Thanks, guys. Take care.